Bit of a different video today. Normally I'm not on this side of the camera, but I wanted to make a video about how I find stuff on eBay, or at least specifically on this one, how do you figure out if some random bit of computer hardware, like some server or whatever, has anything modern in it or is worth anything if you're looking at buying old servers to take out motherboards and stuff like that. I found an example of something that I tried to win and I lost. So unfortunately, spoiler alert, at the end, I won't be able to prove it, but I think we're pretty dead on what is in this thing. I picked this Barco audio cue. Now, I don't know anything about Barco. They obviously work in audio equipment. The device itself is some rack mount server. It's got nice speed holes in it, so it's it looks like a generic industrial chassis. One giveaway when you're looking at this kind of stuff is the fact that it's got a DVD drive, which is usually an indicator that it's a fairly old product, but not necessarily. I mean, sometimes they just have these in devices and they're just there, especially something that deals with audio. Who knows, they expect you to load up stuff onto it. Has two hot swap bays on it. Just looking at the front, you can't get too much information on it. You can see that it does have activity lights for a hard drive for one. That can be a good indicator whether or not it's something that, like an embedded system that won't have anything in it. It'll just have like some custom motherboard and some flash. On the side it says ACS 410. Now I looked this thing up. From what I can tell, on a high level, this thing basically operates a system that is like a really accurate surround sound system. It's designed for like guard training and stuff, so you can have like an intruder sound coming from a very specific point to train a guard. I don't know if it's a part of a whole physical system where you'd have like some kind of targets or whatever. It looks like this particular device is designed to do the audio control for the surround system. It says it's made in Germany. Yeah, on the back, the dead giveaway there's two like big dead giveaways. One is if it's got USB 3, it's obviously of a certain age, so it's not that old. If you get a board, if you see a motherboard that has USB 3 on it, if you see like a parallel port, just kill it, forget it. It's going to be like a Pentium 3 or something. So it's almost always never worth it to get something that has a parallel port on it. Serial port is different. Serial ports are on server boards. You can look at this board right away and you can tell that it's not a server board. Why? It has audio. They don't put audio jacks. You don't need surround sound on a server board. So obviously this is a consumer board of some type. They've got some add-in cards which look like they look like they're kind of some synchronization signal, and a dual redundant power supply, which doesn't really tell you anything. When I first saw it, I was like, okay, it's got E serial ATA, so it's not that new because I ditched eSATA a while ago, but it looks like it's a fairly high-end board because it's got dual Ethernet and it's got a ton of USB ports. And especially back in the day when USB 3 was new, a lot of ports means a fairly high-end board, like a workstation board. My research into this, the chain of events that I took, a trick that you can use that on motherboards to figure out what the brand is. I mean, I can spot like a Supermicro server board. They're the most common in servers. If you want to just see the brand of the server board or the board, you can figure it out by just taking the MAC address and Googling it or running it through a lookup. Because MAC addresses are partitioned out to companies, so you can actually just look up who owns the thing, and this one is Asus. So I knew it was an Asus board. I knew it was a consumer board, or at least some kind of consumer board. It has audio on it. What I did is I started looking up specific product. So this is the ACS 410. So if we start looking up the ACS 410, this is where I got most of the information. You can see the original price of $21,590 US. You can still order this, by the way. B&H will actually get you one of these if you give them $21,000. So there's not really much information on B&H. So what I've done is I've added Barco to the search just to narrow it down, because often like weird product numbers are shared by completely different devices. This is their little brochure for what this thing does. You can see that it says it comes with a 128 gig SSD, 16 gigs of RAM. What kind of RAM? Is it ECC? Is it DDR2, 3, 4? And this is so common with these companies, is they don't tell you what generation of the product it is. So it says it's an Intel Core i7. At time of filming, we're at 12th gen. So is it, which one is it? The giveaway is that it's a hex core, 3.3 gigahertz and a 3.6 boost. So if we search for i7, 3.3 gigahertz, 3.6 boost, and hex core, we get the i7 5820K, which is a high-end desktop chip. They use the 2011 socket instead of the standard. At the time, it would have been the 1150 or something, or 55 at the time. So it's not the consumer board, it's a workstation board. It's this server chip style board, but it's meant for workstation use. So it doesn't have ECC or anything. Looking at it, 6 cores, 12 threads. I think someone's trying to sell it for $250. It's not worth $250 now. In general, old processors are worth a lot less than old motherboards. Old motherboards die. Old processors don't, for the most part, because if your processor works the first 3 days, it's probably going to work the next 20 years. Whereas a motherboard, the caps fail, and MOSFETs can fail in the VRM, that kind of things. USB ports can get zapped and die, so people just throw out the boards. So over time, the number of motherboards drops pretty rapidly. So anyway, we have our i7 5820K. We know what processor it is. In this particular case, this is pretty much the only result. There's no real contention between other ones. Although, in general, it can be a Xeon chip as well. Intel tends to make Xeon versions of all the consumer chips, or at least most of them. And it's the same thing. They usually just can't overclock, and they have ECC enabled. By the way, screw you Intel, enable ECC on your desktop chips. AMD does. So it could be the Xeon variant of this chip. So there's a slight chance that it could be either a workstation board that uses a X99 chipset, which is the consumer high-end desktop board, or the server chipset. I don't remember which one it is at this generation. It's like C608 or something. We'll just assume it's the i7, whatever. So now we know what processor it has. Because this generation of processor uses the X99, all you have to do is Asus motherboard along with X99 and just start looking through pictures, and eventually, they're only going to make, like, I would say up to like 6 at most motherboards for each generation. So all you have to do is start looking around, and you'll eventually figure out the board. And if you look at, well, this is on a reseller site, but look at that. That looks awfully similar to the board. And if we go to Asus's site on this particular board, you can see it is, that's got to be it. So it supports the 2011 V3 socket, which is matching up with the CPU we found. And at the time of filming, I've seen these boards go for $250. Plus you get the memory and the processor and anything else that's in that chassis. Who knows what they have in there. Probably not too much, but you never know. There could be an extra hard drive or something, or those acquisition cards or the timing cards. They could be something that's really niche and worth some money. This is actually a pretty impressive board. It has tons of PCI Express slots on it. I would say probably dead on that this is the processor and this is the motherboard inside this random product that we can't really find any information on, and that's how I do it. Sometimes companies will actually tell you what generation their processor is or what model. It's very rare, very rare. I think it's like a mix of like they don't want to give away what their hardware is running on, so you build your own. But I think it's also because people may not understand that in a product niche like this, where you're making a server or a specific workstation, it's got to be the same every time. They don't want to put in a 6th gen and a 8th gen and a 12th, and like they don't want to change that unless they have to, because they've verified that this works. So what will happen is you will get older systems. This one I think says 2018 on the label, but you can get stuff with that's 2018 and it has 5-year-old processors in it. And it's not necessarily that they're trying to screw you, it's just that that is verified and it works with their setup, so they tend to keep it the same. And like I said, they rarely tell you, so figuring out what exactly the board is can be difficult from the brochures, because as we saw with this one, it's so vague. It just says it's got Ethernet and it just says a 6-core i7. And you look around, there's nothing else on this. You know, is it a solid state drive? Is it an NVMe solid state drive? Is it serial ATA? Probably 2.5-inch serial ATA, but who knows? They won't tell you. It actually doesn't even say that it's redundant power supply. Now that I'm looking at this, it just says it's a power. It has a power supply, so they don't even mention the fact that it's a dual redundant power supply on this particular model. Unfortunately, I didn't win this one. It went a little higher than what I bid. I bid around 300. In retrospect, like I when I buy this kind of stuff to shoot a video for, I try to get it like where I can break even. It's not like I make any money off YouTube, really. I try to make it so like if it's $100 thing and I can sell the motherboard for $100 after, that's great, because you know then I just I get a video out of it. This one I bid around 300, thinking that you know I can get about 300 back from it. But in retrospect, I probably should have gone to like 400 and just taken a little bit of a loss or a risk that the board wouldn't be the same. Because one thing to be careful about is companies do these like silent revisions, where you can go and buy a server, and like you look on their website and it'll say like antivirus true protect 1000 or whatever the hell it's called, and it will say it comes with a 12th gen, you know, or modern Intel chip, and or people will have posted on Reddit that they opened it up, it's a modern thing. But what you don't know is that there's 10 revisions of that, because some companies do change their hardware all the time. So it's you can end up with like a Pentium 3, even though it said it was like a high-end system when you looked it up. Be sure to really pay attention to the ports on the motherboard. That's a big giveaway. But some cases don't even show you the ports because the motherboard's internal. So it's kind of a risk sometimes. And you know, I have bought terrible motherboards over the years to do videos on. But for the most part, using methods like this to track down little bits of information to put it all together is usually a good bet to get you an interesting purchase, at least. Maybe not necessarily a profitable one, because I don't think this is a particularly good thing to do to try and turn a profit, where you buy old motherboard or old servers to try and extract parts from them to resell. It just does work sometimes where you can sell old things for a lot, especially with the new processors out. Like now that AMD and Intel are competing so much, new processors like the 12th gen Intel, they're just like so cheap and so good. Like their i3s are amazing for a 4-core 8-thread. Like I have no reason to use anything older than these things anymore. And AMD with the AM5 coming out soon, I just don't see any point of really using older chips, because they have low-end chips now. That was the thing, you couldn't get like a good low-end like multi-core chip. Now it's just like even the i5s and stuff, they're great, and the individual cores are so powerful. So like my theory is that the prices of older Intel chips, especially like pre 11th gen, are just plummeting. Because like I've been selling off a lot of my boards. I did it in a previous video where I was mentioning that I was getting rid of some of my older systems, and it's just like it's not worth it to keep them. The price of a motherboard and a processor for like, you know, like an 8600K or something, or 8700K, you just buy a modern one. You can get a brand new motherboard with a warranty and a new processor, an i5 or an i4 or i3. It's cheaper and faster and uses less power. So yeah, I think they'll kind of dream of finding old servers with like useful stuff in them, even the Xeon boards. The only thing that really kind of holds its value to some degree are the Supermicro boards. But there's a lot of boards in servers that are just like Pentium 4s in a desktop socket. So it's just, yeah, you're taking a risk with most of those. A lot of them are just boring Pentium 4s that are worth nothing. Or Core 2s. Core 2s are like, you can't even sell them anymore. I have a 3rd gen Intel chip on eBay right now, and I can't even sell it. It's an i5. I can't even sell it for like $6 because it's just they're like worthless now. But that's about it. I just wanted to talk about some of my techniques for finding these things. I'd like to do some more videos, maybe a longer form video of how I find stuff on eBay to begin with, like how to search for like kind of oddball computer stuff or oddball electronics. But that'll be another day. This is my test setup for the multicam.